You're slicing something in the kitchen, a tomato maybe, or an apple, and then a tiny slip. The knife catches your finger. Not bad, not serious. You look down, see that thin red line opening up, and you do that thing everyone does. You wince, you press the finger against your thumb, and you wait. What you don't see, what you absolutely cannot see with the naked eye, is that in the precise moment the blade crossed your skin, one of the most sophisticated construction and emergency response operations on Earth just kicked off, automatically, without a single conscious thought from you. A microscopic workforce of millions, mobilizing faster than you can read this sentence. Welcome to Briefly Science. And today we're zooming all the way in, past the skin, past the cells, into the actual molecular machinery that puts you back together after a wound. It is, without exaggeration, one of the most beautiful things your body does. And most of us have no idea it's happening. Let's go in. The first milliseconds after a cut are pure emergency mode. Your body has just detected a catastrophic breach. From its perspective, the wall has been broken. Blood is escaping. Bacteria are about to pour in through an open door. The first responders aren't cells. They're the blood vessels themselves. In the very first seconds, the blood vessels around the wound slam shut. They constrict, tightening down hard to slow the bleeding. Your body is buying time. And in that brief window, the real emergency crew arrives. Platelets. Now, most people have heard of platelets, but I don't think people fully appreciate what they are. Platelets are not typical cells. They have no nucleus. They're more like tiny preloaded capsules, fragments of larger cells floating around in your bloodstream in the hundreds of thousands, just waiting to be useful. There are roughly 150,000 to 400,000 of them per microliter of your blood, which is a volume smaller than a grain of sand. Each one is essentially a first responder kit, packed with chemical signals, growth factors, and clotting materials, ready to deploy. And they deploy fast. The instant platelets encounter exposed collagen, the structural protein in your skin that's now visible through the wound. They change shape. They go from smooth little discs to something resembling a spiky ball, extending tiny arms called pseudopods in every direction. They become sticky. They start grabbing onto each other, piling up at the wound site, forming an initial platelet plug, a biological cork. But a pile of sticky platelets isn't stable. Something stronger is needed. And so, simultaneously, a cascade begins. The coagulation cascade. 12 different proteins in your blood, activating each other in sequence like falling dominoes. Each one triggers the next, in a chain that ends with the production of a protein called fibrin. And fibrin is the stuff of architecture. Fibrin threads begin extending outward from the platelet plug like thousands of tiny ropes, weaving through and around the platelets, through the escaping red blood cells, threading them all together into a tight cross-linked mesh, a net, a biological net, woven at the molecular scale. And in roughly 60 seconds, 60, from the first platelet contact, you have a clot. A provisional wall. The bleeding slows, then stops. Your finger is sealed. That scab you'll have in an hour? That's not dead tissue you need to pick off. That's an engineered temporary scaffold, specifically designed to hold the wound closed while the real construction work begins underneath. Now here's where it gets even more interesting, because while the platelet plug was forming, those platelets weren't just making a physical barrier. They were sending messages. Those spiky little capsules, in the process of activating, were releasing chemical signals. Growth factors with names like PDGF, TGF-beta, VEGF, that diffuse outward into the surrounding tissue like a broadcast signal. And this signal has one message: send help. Now. Phase 2 begins. Inflammation. We tend to think of inflammation as a bad thing. The redness, the swelling, the heat, and the throbbing around a wound. But this is a fundamental misunderstanding. Inflammation, in the context of wound healing, is not the problem. Inflammation is the cleanup crew. Within hours of the injury, your immune system gets the message from those platelet-released signals, and it starts sending in the first wave: neutrophils. Neutrophils are white blood cells, and they are aggressive, fast, and somewhat brutal. They pour into the wound site through the slightly dilated blood vessels. That's the swelling you see, and they get to work immediately. They engulf bacteria that entered through the wound. They consume damaged cell fragments. They release reactive oxygen species, essentially controlled molecular bleach, to sterilize the area. Think of neutrophils as the demolition crew. They don't build anything. They clear the site, ruthlessly and quickly. But here's the thing about neutrophils. They're not supposed to stick around. They're activated, reactive, destructive, useful for cleanup, but dangerous if left unchecked. And so a second wave arrives. The macrophages. Macrophages are, honestly, remarkable cells. They arrive 2 to 3 days after the injury, and they have a completely different job profile. Where neutrophils are single-minded destroyers, macrophages are coordinators. They engulf the debris left behind by the neutrophils. They devour bacteria. They even consume the neutrophils themselves once their job is done, clearing the inflammatory stage before it overshoots. And then, and this is the part I find almost elegant, they switch modes. They start releasing signals that tell the body, okay, cleanup is done. Start building. The transition from destruction to construction happens around day 3 to 4. And the cells that respond to the macrophages' call are fibroblasts. Fibroblasts are your construction workers. Quiet, steady, industrious cells that live in the connective tissue of your skin, largely dormant under normal circumstances. But when they receive the chemical invitation from macrophages and platelets, a cocktail of growth factors and signals saying, build here, build now, they migrate into the wound site and start doing what they do best. They make collagen. Collagen is the structural backbone of your skin. It's a fibrous protein, long, strong, intertwined ropes of amino acids. And it's what gives skin its tensile strength, its elasticity, its ability to resist tearing. When fibroblasts arrive at the wound site, they begin secreting new collagen fibers, laying them down across the damaged area in a loose provisional weave. The wound starts to fill in from the bottom up. This provisional new tissue has a name, granulation tissue. It's pink and slightly bumpy. You've probably seen it at the base of a healing scrape. It looks almost alive, slightly glistening, with tiny blood vessels threading through it. That's because it is alive. It's a rapidly assembling scaffold, vascularized, cellular, packed with the raw materials of reconstruction. And speaking of blood vessels, let's talk about angiogenesis, because this is something that should genuinely make you stop and think. As the wound fills with granulation tissue, the area desperately needs oxygen and nutrients to fuel all this construction work. So new blood vessels are sprouting from existing ones, growing into the wound site, directed by chemical gradients of VEGF, vascular endothelial growth factor, that the macrophages and platelets released. New capillary networks extend into the new tissue like tree roots growing toward water, bringing oxygen, bringing nutrients, establishing circulation in territory that just days ago was cut open and bleeding. Meanwhile, at the edges of the wound, something else is happening. The keratinocytes, the surface skin cells, are on the move. Starting from the wound margins, keratinocytes begin migrating inward, sliding across the top of the granulation tissue like a slow-moving sheet. They divide, proliferate, advance. Cell by cell, the surface coverage extends across the wound gap. And at a certain point, usually around day 5 through 7 for a clean, small cut, the leading edges of the migrating keratinocyte sheets meet in the middle. The wound is sealed at the surface. The wound is closed, but your body isn't done, not even close. Phase 4, the remodeling phase, is the longest, most patient part of the operation. It starts around week 3 and can continue, quietly, for up to 2 years. The provisional collagen that the fibroblasts laid down during proliferation was functional but disorganized, a tangled, somewhat random weave. Strong enough to close the wound, but not as strong as normal skin. So, over months and months, specialized enzymes called matrix metalloproteinases slowly dissolve the disorganized collagen, and fibroblasts lay down new collagen to replace it. More organized, better aligned. cross-linked more tightly. The collagen shifts from an early, weaker type to a stronger, more mature type. The wound contracts slightly. Myofibroblasts, a special subtype of fibroblast with properties of muscle cells, literally pull the wound edges inward, reducing the total area of scar tissue. The extra blood vessels that grew in during proliferation begin to regress. They're no longer needed, and the tissue becomes less red over time. And at the end of all this, a scar. A slightly different texture, a slightly different color, permanent in most cases. But here's a sobering fact about that scar. Even after all of this work, the clotting, the inflammation, the granulation tissue, the remodeling, the tensile strength of repaired skin maxes out at around 80% of the original, never 100. The scar is always slightly less than what was there before. Your body does extraordinary things, but it isn't magic, it's biology. It works with what it has. Now, briefly, because this matters, let's talk about what happens when things go wrong. Chronic wounds, wounds that simply don't progress through these phases, that get stuck. Most commonly, they get stuck in inflammation. The neutrophils keep arriving. The macrophages never quite switch from destroy to build. The fibroblasts don't get the right signals, and the wound stays open, sometimes for months, sometimes for years, slowly expanding rather than closing. This is the reality for many people with diabetes, where poor circulation means cells can't receive or send the right signals, or people with compromised immune systems, or people with certain nutritional deficiencies, because your skin needs oxygen and vitamin C to properly hydroxylate collagen to build those cross-linked structures. Without those, the collagen literally doesn't hold together properly. Sailors on long sea voyages without fresh produce used to show their old wounds reopening from scurvy, their perfectly healed tissue dissolving as their vitamin C ran out. It's a quiet horror, honestly. The body attempting to maintain its repairs and quietly failing. But for most people, most of the time, the construction crew shows up, on time, without you doing anything, without you even being aware. Consider what just happened in your finger while you pressed it against your thumb and waited. In seconds, constriction, platelet activation, the coagulation cascade, a fibrin mesh assembled from molecular components. In hours, neutrophils swarming the site, macrophages arriving to manage the aftermath. In days, fibroblasts weaving new collagen, blood vessels sprouting into fresh territory, skin cells migrating across the wound surface to seal it shut. Over weeks, collagen reorganizing, vessels retreating, tissue tightening and strengthening. A repair operation conducted by cells that have never read a blueprint, that have no brain, that have no memory of what your finger looked like before. They just respond, follow chemical gradients, execute ancient genetic programs, and somehow, collectively, produce something that looks almost exactly like the thing that was there before. There's something quietly profound about that. The universe breaks things constantly. Entropy is relentless. It pushes everything toward disorder, toward dissolution. And life, somehow, figured out how to push back. To have its pieces look at damage and build. To have chemistry read the shape of a wound and know exactly what belongs there. You're not just a body that breaks, you're a body that is always quietly in the process of putting itself back together. If this kind of journey into the extraordinary mechanics of living blows your mind the way it blows mine, then Briefly Science is exactly where you should be. Hit subscribe. The algorithm absolutely needs your help, and you'll get the good stuff. And leave a comment. What do you want us to zoom into next? A cell? A synapse? The moment you fall asleep? We're listening.